Welcome to Get Unstuck, Move Forward with Your Life. I'm your host, Jason Hopkins. Thank you for joining us today. Today, I'm honored to welcome a guest who has been described as insightful, practical, and to the point. He tells the truth and cares passionately. Joe Gregory is the sales catalyst. He has a BA in psychology from the University of Richmond, Virginia, an MBA in marketing from the University of Massachusetts, Boston. He is a trained Tony Robbins coach and a certified emotional intelligence practitioner. When not working with a client, looking for a client, or working on his craft, Joe can be found rooting for the Red Sox, the Rockies, or the New York Rangers and Jets. Joe's been a Rotarian since 2003, a lifelong learner, and a prolific reader of mostly nonfiction books related to sales, business, psychology, and personal development. Welcome, Joe. I'm grateful to you for being here today for another episode of Get Unstuck Radio.
Thanks so much, Jason. I'm excited to be part of the show today.
Well, it's a pleasure. So I gave just a bit of backstory about who you are. You have this unique title, the Sales Catalyst. I'd love to know a little bit more about you, and if you can share with our audience, who you are and how you became the Sales Catalyst.
Yeah, and it's the journey of life, right? And
Right.
Steve Jobs said it so well at one of his commencement addresses, right? That you connect the dots in life, but you only can connect the dots in reverse, right? We can see how one thing led to another, and how I wound up being the sales catalyst, having my own sales coaching and consulting practice. It really started at a young age of delivering newspapers, having my own business. As a little kid, I had my own painting business in college. And then in college, I was really fascinated with psychology. And little did I know how well psychology would prepare me for the rest of my journey. I've been really fascinated in what makes me tick. Why do I do what I do, or why I don't do what I should do? And the same for other people. And so, through my journey, I was in sales and sales leadership positions and general manager, branch manager positions. And along the way, I worked for some really large corporations. And as part of that, I got training in all sorts of things, right? But all the big sales programs, sales training programs, I got trained in. And I said to myself, this was actually in the late 1990s, I said, that would actually be cool to do one day. And then lo and behold, through a series of events, I wound up working for a large international, well-known sales training company for a couple of years. And then I decided to go out on my own. And that's how I wound up starting my own business, the Sales Catalyst. And April 1st is my anniversary date. It'll be my 9th anniversary. I started in the spring of 2014. So I can look back and connect dots, right? And
Right.
I think all of us can do that, right? Look back and connect the dots and see, how did I wind up in this now? And I really feel like I'm in my sweet spot and really just getting started. And I learn more all the time, and just an exciting place to be, working with people and helping them get unstuck in sales and unstuck in life.
Right. I love the passion and energy you bring to this conversation, and really admire and acknowledge the dots that have to be connected sometimes for us to end up where we are. So, again, this title, Sales Catalyst, tell me what that means to you. Explain for our listeners how that's different and builds upon this career that you've had of basically doing this inside other large organizations and then deciding to branch off onto your own.
Yeah, there's two things I want to address with that. First, I'm big with words and with definitions, right? So a catalyst, the definition of a catalyst is a person or event that quickly causes change or action.
Okay.
A person or event that quickly causes change or action. And for folks, if you've worked with a coach or a consultant or stuff before, that's what they do, right? Is they help you to cause change and take some action for it. So that's what the catalyst stands for. And one of my driving purposes is the word impact. And I always looked at historically, when I was in sales, they put me in turnaround situations, territories that were underperforming, right? And interestingly, although I've done well from a money standpoint, I was more motivated by impact, all right? What difference could I make? And money was kind of a scorecard, for the difference that I make. So that impact. And part of my journey, Jason, was when I first started in telecom sales, many years ago. I sucked. I struggled big time. I'd come out of investment property sales as a young man. I went into that right out of college, and
Okay.
then decided to get out of that. Now, a good year in investment property sales was selling 3 or 4 deals a year,
Right.
right? And then now I had to sell 6 to 8 deals a month, and I really struggled out of the gate. I got put on the dreaded performance improvement plan, right? Do this or you're fired. And I was one of the fortunate ones to make it through because a guy named Glenn Kay, who's one of the top sales guys in the office, took me under his wing, went out with me and made calls with me and made suggestions for things for me to change. Glenn was a catalyst in my life. Right.
Wow.
And everything changed from there. And a lot of people have never had the experience of having good coaching and training. Right. I did because of Glenn. And I also worked for, at the time, a Fortune 5 company to be able to do that. So I want to be like what Glenn was to me. And it was, he played a life-changing role for me many, many years ago.
I love that, and your intentionality of words to me is so spot on. I mean that intention is the place that I come from in the work that I do, even behind the name of this show and what that really means and represents. I love the symbolism of it. The word you mentioned a minute ago, impact. What strikes me as interesting about your story, and I think for anybody that's listening, whether you're in sales or not, is kind of the systematic steps that happened that built upon each other to bring you to this unique place. But recognizing that where you started in investment property sales and closing a few deals a year versus something that required you to close several deals a month, the piece that strikes different about that, and maybe why, to use your words, you sucked in the beginning of moving into telecom sales, was you had been in a business that was more relational, perhaps, in something that was more of a faster turn. How has, and it sounds like I'm guessing, having Glenn as your mentor, knowing you're a pretty relational guy, how important do you think those relationships are as somebody is really moving through their career and wanting to go maybe a different direction?
I think relationships are everything, right? And our son's 28, and I preach to him that your own personal network of people is the most valuable asset you'll ever have. You can lose everything, right?
Right.
But if you're known and trusted by others, you can bounce back quickly, right? And I can connect everything the good that's happened in my life. It is because relationships led me from one thing to another, all the way through.
And I think that's such sound advice. And especially I see among younger people today, the way that they connect and network and build is so different than maybe how we would have done it. How have you seen that evolve over the years? And do you think the way that we're, younger generations are doing it today, do you think it has the ability to have the same impact or effect on their lives? I mean, specifically, you mentioned your son's 28.
Yeah, it is wildly different, right? I'll throw out there, generations have always said, like our parents' generation always said, oh, you guys don't get it and stuff. We figured it out. So
Right.
I have great faith and hope and optimism with the next generations. It's just different. Where I do worry a little bit right now is the whole. I'm a big believer in working from home. I do that, right? But for younger people in their career, being in the office can be key because that's where you develop the relationships, right? Yes, you can do it this way and you can do it in new ways. But I just know, like in my life, like going to lunch with a peer of yours, right? Going out after work and having drinks and things like that, or going to a sporting event, those types of things. I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over time. But listen, I'm really, really tight with my high school buddies, that I grew up with, and we're
Right.
Scattered around the country and stuff. We're on a text exchange, right? So it's great. Modern technology makes it easier to be connected. It's just different, right? It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
I think that's curious because I am fascinated by the gifts that we have of technology. And I think a lot of times most of us think that implies a sincere connection. And the reality is I'm not sure that it really does. I mean, frankly, how you and I are conversing today, I think is a second best for meeting somebody in person, and anything after that is even less effective. So, it is fascinating to me, and I will see as an experiment how this plays out. But, for somebody who is in a career that's wanting to move up, that perhaps is a remote worker, what are some things that they can do to help build their network or connection if they work from home?
Yeah, you used the word intention earlier, right? You got to be intentional about it, whether you're face to face or whether you're remote, right? And I know folks that work from home, right? There's the instant messaging, right? To stay connected with people. You can still pick up the phone and call people, right? I'm still a big believer in the telephone. That was the second social media tool after the telegraph, right? Hundreds of years ago. It's still wildly effective. You just got to be really intentional about it. And from a sales perspective, what I coach my clients, because a lot of selling is done remotely now, right? It always was, right? We didn't spend that much of our time face to face with customers. We did a lot of stuff in email and phone, and now video is part of it. But you can start calls early, right? Say you got a customer meeting at 10 o'clock, let them know, listen, I'll be logged on at 9:45 and we'll stay till 11:15, because those conversations like in the conference room on site, right? Before, like while you're setting up and afterwards, and even like walking out of the building with a customer, those were so valuable. So you got to build in space to be able to do that. And I know that's worked effectively for people, is starting the call early, inviting people, saying, hey, you can show up early and we can visit.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And I know that the thing that has felt so compressed, post pandemic and everybody being on Zoom, is this: you go from back to back meeting that often doesn't leave a lot of time or space to really kind of reset yourself. So, anybody that's listening, I encourage you to make space and time to take care of yourself along the way. But the recognition that, there are valuable conversations that can be had in those gap places, like Joe's suggesting here. I mean, I know for me, I try to make most of my hour-long calls 50 minutes now, or 55 at a minimum, so everybody has a chance for a bio break, or just to take a breather for a minute, to look at their emails or text messages or whatever. It's, it feels like we're all being pulled in so many different directions today.
Yeah, we are. And that's why you got to be intentional, right? And with my one-on-one clients, the one-on-one catalyst coaching that I do, we start with a 1-minute arrival, and we sit quietly with our eyes closed and follow our breath. And we do that to settle our nervous system, right? And to let go of all the energy that we're bringing in from the previous meeting or the previous call, right? So that we can go and be present for that. And people, my clients now, Jason, the cool thing is, if I forget to do it, they're like, hey, we haven't had our minute yet.
So you're doing a centering exercise with everybody that you meet with. I love that. I wonder how many of your clients are actually doing that in all of their meetings.
I've had clients share that they're not necessarily doing it in all of their meetings, but they're doing it for themselves, right? And again, this isn't woo-woo stuff. Neuroscience. Right. Proven this, right? If you sit quietly and follow your breath, your nervous system settles, right? And when your nervous system settles, the prefrontal cortex part of your brain comes more online, and you're more effective. That's the executive functioning part of our brain for problem solving and decision making.
Well, I think it's really smart on your part to integrate that into, your practice of working with clients, because frankly, the energy that somebody brings to a call, a conversation, I mean, it can affect everything. And if you level set from the very beginning, kind of being in a centered place yourself, and then everybody else with intention is doing that also, I would imagine the outcomes are better, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. And salespeople that are listening to this, do not go into a customer meeting without doing this, right? They feel you energetically. There's the old saying, right? That person's got a bad vibe, right? They feel us
Right.
energetically more than the words that are coming out of our mouth, right? So we got to clear it out. And that's why, I have a top sales guy at a company that's a client of mine, 5 minutes before any call, no cell phone, no radio, no nothing. He just sits because he knows if he looks at his email or voicemail messages or the news, he's going to get angry, right? Or pissed off about something.
Right.
He wants to settle
Right.
himself before going into a meeting.
And frankly, what you're sharing, I think, is practical advice for anybody. I mean, really being able to walk into a space with intention, centered back into what your purpose and your next set of 60 minutes may be, really makes a lot of sense. So anybody that's listening, I mean, I encourage you to take Joe's advice here and try this. Just try it one time before a meeting, spend a minute getting centered and really setting the intention for where you want the meeting to go and see if it makes a difference.
It will.
Tell me about the types of clients that you work with and then maybe how your own journey has guided or shaped that over the course of your career.
Yeah, thanks for that. And typically people show up because they feel stuck in some way, right? Or they feel that they've had a setback. So stuck in my world looks like they're at a certain level. Either the company's at a certain level of sales, or my one-on-one client is at a certain level of income. Right. And they want to be able to get to the next level, and they feel
right.
that they feel stuck, where they are. So those are often the people that show up, or they've had a decrease. Right. There's been what people label as a setback. And for me, the key for me working with people is number one, do they have a problem that I feel I can help with? Right. It's got to be within my wheelhouse. Then I'm looking for, do they have a growth mindset? Are they looking to get better? The people that perform really well consistently seem to, they're always looking for an edge, right? Knowing that I don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just give me little tweaks, give us outsized results, right? So they have that growth mindset, knowing that they can get better. They're open-minded is a big part of it, and they know that they can go faster by getting help than they can on their own. So those are the types of people that show up for me, but they're looking to solve a problem. They're looking to get to the next level. They're stuck in some way. It could be in business. It could be for my one-on-one coaching. It could be in a relationship or health-wise, but typically sales and business is where I focus on.
So how often would you say when somebody comes to you with kind of, whatever their problem is that they're looking for you to help them with to solve, how often do you feel like, let's continue to do sales as an example, and I'd love for you to share more about the other types of coaching you do. How often do you see people that are in roles that are just not right for them? Maybe they're not really suited for sales.
Yeah, that can be the case. That isn't often what I see, with clients showing up for me, but certainly running sales teams and organizations for a long time and working with companies that have them. Yeah, people are miscast, right? And the great book, Good to Great, right, talks about having the right people on the bus and the right people in the right seat. You just may not be in the right seat.
Right.
Right. And that's okay. For me, though, the problem's never what they think is the real problem. Right. And I work from the performance equation that was developed by Tim Galway back in the 1970s. He wrote an incredible book called The Inner Game of Tennis. And this is what it looks like. And he was a tennis coach and then wound up building a large consulting practice that still runs today. And the performance equation is performance equals potential minus interference. Performance equals potential minus interference. Potential is your God-given gifts, talents, and abilities with skills layered upon that, right? Interference, most people think of interference as external interference, the supply chain issues and all the other things that are going on. He was talking about internal interference. What is going on in the most valuable real estate in the world, the 6 inches between our ears, right? How can we turn down the internal interference? And that is what the problem is for virtually all of us. And in the world of being stuck, right? It's that first of all, you're not stuck. You just think you are, right? We're overthinking things. And we have so much resistance, Jason, right? We get angry and pissed off that I have people, making $500,000 a year and they're angry and pissed off because they can't get the 750, right?
Right.
People stuck at really good levels. It's the resistance. We spend so much time and energy arguing with what is, right? How do we start turning down resistance? And from a sales perspective, as a salesperson, how do we turn down our resistance? How do we facilitate turning down the buyer's resistance? Because their walls are up, right? Because they think there's this trained killer in front of them called the salesperson that's trying to take their money.
I love that. And again, I go back to, when you were sharing the 1 minute centering exercise, the things that you're talking about here, they're practical and applicable to anybody. I do a lot of work with clients and coaching myself. And the thing that I have recognized, and I will tell people, as kindly as possible, the things that you think are going to be the worst things that could happen to you are often not the worst things that happen to you when they come up. It's the stuff that wakes you up in the middle of the night that you never saw coming that will leave you flat on your butt, and I think from that understanding, and I don't mean that in a critical way of anybody's journey, but there is this malleability in life that I think as we learn to evolve and adapt to live in the flow, life goes much better. And I'm not saying bad things don't happen, and really bad things can happen to people. But the fact of the matter is the lesson is really how you show up for yourself into those moments, not just the good times, but the bad times also. And recognizing that there are going to be times in your life that require a different version of you. And the more you can prepare yourself to turn that noise down in your head, the easier it is to dial up all of the tools that you have in your toolbox.
So spot on, right? And it's just like in my own journey, right? There's times that I felt that there were setbacks, right? They weren't setbacks, they were setups for something better. Full disclosure, it was painful and difficult, for a period of time, right? But without certain things happening, I wouldn't have been able to get to a different level, right? And two other points around that. One being, so oftentimes as parents, we say for our kids, I just want our child to be happy, right? A better way of looking at this is I want my child to be capable of handling whatever life brings them.
Amen.
Because the reality, Jason, is, right, life sucks at times, right? You're not going to be happy all the time. Right. And the positive psychology movement has taken things to extreme. And it's actually called toxic positivity now, that we got to be positive all the time, right? It's challenging. We just had a once in 100-year global pandemic that upended a lot of people's lives, right? So how do we build capability to be able to handle whatever life brings us? And one of the game changers for me and for my clients is when the light bulb goes off, there's a big misunderstanding in life. And the misunderstanding is the outside world is doing this to me, right? I'm feeling angry and pissed off because of the pandemic or because a client said no. And the reality is, Shakespeare said it so well, nothing's good or bad, thinking makes it so. Nothing's good. Everybody listen to this. Nothing's good or bad, thinking makes it so. Right. And we live in the feeling of our thinking, not in the feeling of our circumstances. Nothing can make you stressful other than your own thinking. Nothing can make you angry and pissed off other than your own thinking. Nothing can make you happy and peaceful other than your own thinking. So it's our thinking about it. Because here's the reality, right? If a situation was inherently stressful, it would be stressful to everyone, right? And we know that that's not true.
Well, I mean, and I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The energy you bring to anything often is directly correlated to the output that you're going to get in that situation. And I find it's so fascinating to me. I'll talk to people and it never occurs to them to think about their role. They're so focused on the external interference, to use your word earlier, that they're not focused on the internal interference, and I work with a lot of people probably like you, in relationship situations. And often when things end badly, albeit many times, my reframe is always, well, what did you learn? And what were the gifts that you got out of that? And I think our ability to be able to move from that that negative external or internal interference that we apply to the stories that play out in our lives and move into a space of personal responsibility and then taking action from that place, it kind of reframes everything. Because even for most people, and again, I'm not saying 100% of relationships, but when something bad happens, there's normally something good, if you can get to it, that you got out of that. And it may have taught you one important thing, that you never want more of that again. But I find that people get so dug into making things that happen that are bad, they make it about everybody but themselves. And unless we're willing to shine the light back on ourselves, I don't know how you get real sustained growth.
Yeah, I agree completely. And where we need to be careful there is not to beat ourselves up, right? That this is my fault, right?
Right.
This is just, the idea that you can get your mindset in a certain way, right? And everything's going to be lovey-dovey and peaches and roses all the time is total BS, right? There are going to be challenges in life. The ultimate free will that we have, Jason, is we get to choose how we respond to life. Right? Life unfolds in front of us. We get to choose how to respond. Now, the problem is people are reacting. I think, quite frankly, my observation is very, very few people actually exercise free will. We're on automatic all day long. Just something happens, we react. Something happens, we react. We're in reactive mode all day long. And going back, the key thing here with turning down interference, here's what we know about human performance. And you used the word flow earlier. Humans perform better with less on their mind.
Right.
We perform better with less on our mind. Baseball season's about to start, right? And I'm a huge baseball fan. And a hitter that's in a slump, right? The announcer always says, oh, you can see he's pressing at the plate, right? He's overthinking it. You can't be thinking when a ball's coming at you at 98 miles an hour from 60 feet away, right? In professional baseball, we overthink things, right? And that's what keeps us stuck. Circular thinking.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And you used two words that I love a minute ago, and I use this so often with people, in consideration of conversation with others. Are you responding or are you reacting? And most of us are reacting. And I think, again, not to villainize technology, but technology in many ways, while it has made us connected, it has also robbed us of connection, and it makes so many demands of us. It lures us into the trap of being in the loop of scrolling. And I think it's important for somebody to recognize, are those moments pulling you away from connection that you could have to yourselves or others? And if the answer is yes, in any form or fashion, you may want to be more intentional about what level you engage with it in. And I certainly can admit, in my own world, I spend far more time in the loop than I want to, and there are many good things to glean in those times that can be, life learning lessons and educational and all the things. But 9 times out of 10, they are normally just distraction and white noise that functionally keep you disconnected from yourself and others.
It's so spot on, and that human connection, right, directly related to what I do in sales. And in sales, you often hear, right, you got to have a really solid, unique value proposition, words that come out of your mouth. Now, I want to be clear, there's value in that. You do have to have a good a story to tell. But you know what buyers tell us?
What?
Buyers tell us that when they're waiting and making a decision on who to buy from, and this is across all industries, across all sizes of sales. Yes, your company is important. Yes, your product is important. Yes, your service is important. All those things are really table stakes. The most heavily weighted item in their decision-making process is their experience of you during the process. So how do they have a different experience of you? And unfortunately, there's a sameness problem in sales. Everything looks the same to buyers. The companies look the same, the products look the same, the services look the same, and the salespeople look and sound the same.
Right.
The only thing that doesn't look the same, the price. So they go to that's the differentiator, right? Because that's easy to understand. So how do you, Mr. or Mrs. Salesperson, look and sound different than everybody else. And of course, most salespeople say, well, I definitely do. Buyers will disagree and say, no, you don't, right? And it's that connection, right? And when you show up in a state where there's not a lot of internal interference going on, and that you can follow the flow of the conversation with the buyer, right? Versus having a rigid agenda that you're sticking to, right? And when they serve up what I call cues, right? They'll say something that's like, there's the goal. Most salespeople, and I've been on sales calls, they don't even hear it, right? Or if they do hear it, they don't dig into it. So reduce the internal interference so you can have a better human connection, because that's what buyers want.
Right. And to reframe that in different worlds, it's really the gift of giving somebody your presence.
Amen.
And that's the thing that I have really noticed, that, as we move into this more connected, disconnected world that I like to call it, I mean, we are pulled in so many different directions. It took me more than 40 years to be able to do this kind of work and to get present with somebody. It is truly a gift to actively listen to what somebody is telling you with presence, and then to be able to respond because you listened to them. And that, from my perspective, makes such a difference in having truly connected conversations and outcomes.
Without a doubt. And there's a saying, no one ever listened themselves out of a sale, but plenty of salespeople have talked themselves out of a sale. And what happens with salespeople, their internal, something happens in the sales call, right? And they get triggered. Their emotions start to run, internal interference, and they start talking more. Right. And human beings have an innate need to be heard and understood. And so many of us have never felt heard or understood before. And that's what buyers want, right? It's what your spouse wants. It's what your children want. It's what your coworkers want, right? To be heard and understood. And that starts with presence.
I am so inspired by the practicalness of this conversation and how relatable you, as the sales catalyst, are making these complex constructs very simple for each of us. Joe, the concept of the show obviously is around getting unstuck. I would love to unpack that with you a little bit more. I know in your work as a coach that seems to be probably a pretty consistent theme that you see clients that come to you with stuckness. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the common themes that you recognize among clients, in a hope to let people know that maybe what they're struggling with is not so unique and they're not alone.
Yeah. I've certainly felt that I was stuck at certain points in my life. And I want to start out again, I'm big into words, right? And what is the meaning of stuck? So I looked it up, and it's an adjective: unable to move from a particular position or place, or unable to change a situation. So when I read that, it's like, unable, really? Or we just think that we're stuck, right? And that's where it really plays out. I love using, nature's such a great metaphor for everything, on how everything really works. And it's like, turn to my left and look out the window here. I'm looking at lilac bushes and an aspen tree, and they look dead, right? And they've looked dead for months now. All right. So is the lilac bush stuck? No, within the next 30 days, things are going to start to sprout. Right. And it's the same thing with us. We just think that we're stuck. And, in my own life, I'll go back to the late 1990s, and I was single, living in Greater Boston. I'd been in long-term relationships. It hadn't worked out for marriage. And I thought that I was stuck being single. And then finally, the light bulb dawned on me, and I was like, my life rocks right now. I was living on Beacon Hill. I had season tickets to the Red Sox. My job was going great. And I was like, you know what? If I never get married, I'm good with it, right? I go to my 20th high school reunion in New Jersey. I hook up with my now wife, Tracy. We've known each other since sixth grade homeroom. And less than a year later, I was married and living in Colorado. And wow. my vow always was I was never leaving Boston. I wasn't going to date anybody with kids, and so forth. But life changed for the good in an instant, right? And that's what can happen, right? But the key point there was, Jason, I let go of my resistance of not being married. right? It dawned on me. It's like, God, what am I complaining about? My life is great. I've been stuck in my business, right? There was a period I lost my job in the Great Recession, right? I was a general manager and had a really, really good job, and our branch was doing really well. And boom, I got laid off in November of 2008. 2009 was a struggle. I'm like, oh my God, I was stuck in this situation. Looking back at connecting the dots, there was a piece to the puzzle that had to come together later in 2009 for me, right? So it looked like a setback, but it was a setup, right? So what I've learned about being stuck in my own life and with others is that something either occurs to me or something occurs for me.
I love that.
It's 100% reliable. It's totally unpredictable. So it occurred to me that, oh, my life is great. Okay, I'm not married. So what? My life is great, right? And then in my a journey after I got laid off, right, something occurred for me where I got an introduction to a company. And that's when I went to work for one of the national and international sales training companies, right? A key piece to the puzzle coming together. Now, it sucked, for the time in between there, but things had to come together, right? And that's where we just need to turn down the internal interference, settle ourselves down. And I invite everybody listening today, look at your life. You will see that something occurs to you or something occurs for you. Spring is coming. The lilacs will be gorgeous in another 60 days.
Right. That's beautiful. And it so resonates with my own story. I've shared many times, but I too suffered some, of the most painful setbacks after the crash of 2008. And really, I will admit, even till as late as last year, I spent the better part of a decade hating that story. And it was my direct opposition of that story that completely robbed me of so many things. And I'm not sure what the catalyst was for this. And I've really tried to think back what it was. And I wish I could remember, because it'd be a more compelling story. But there was a light bulb moment for me that said, you have spent a decade hating the story that made you who you are. And while I would not want to go back and get those T-shirts again, so to speak, what I can say is everything does happen for a reason. And what I tell people all the time is, what is meant for you will not pass you by. And if you don't believe that, just wait. It hasn't come. But I do think that there is an element, and I love how you framed your own story about releasing resistance that makes space for the things that are meant for you to show up. And frankly, so much of us spend so much time, holding on to things that are really not meant for us, the job that's not meant for us, the relationship that's not meant for us. If there's something in you that knows and believes that you're destined for something different, something greater, something that's not what you currently have, like, there is an element of having faith, but also, what are the active steps you're taking to move forward in your life? Like, what have you seen in your working with clients all of these years? What is the turning point for many people from moving to stuck to unstuck?
There's two things. We both just in the last few minutes used the term the light bulb went on, right? You said a light bulb moment. That's a moment of insight, right? And I believe that you can call it whatever you want to call it, that there's, an intelligence operating the universe. You can call it God. It's the intelligence that's operating the universe that's going to have the lilacs bloom, the aspen tree bloom, the grass grow, and all that. That same intelligence is beating my heart, digesting my food. It's real-time responsive intelligence that we can tap into. And that's where those light bulb moments come. Everybody's had a light bulb moment, right? And we can tap into that, but we can't do it when we've got all the internal interference going on. And what I use is I use a snow globe as a metaphor, right? This is Snoop in Woodstock skating along the ice. And this is what we do to ourselves. We shake ourselves. Your story that you kept telling yourself, right, all day long, and the same thing that I've done, you can't see clearly, right, when we shake it. But all we have to do to settle ourselves down is just stop shaking ourselves and look at this. The snow settles on its own. I don't have to do anything to have the internal interference settle down. So it's just, it's knowing. Now, there's action involved too, right? And tiny steps, right? What do you feel compelled to do? That's where the real-time responsive intelligence comes in. I had to show up at my 20th high school reunion to meet Tracy, right? So did she.
Right.
Oh, by the way, as part of that story, I stayed back in first grade because I had struggled learning how to read. We wouldn't have been in the same class if I hadn't stayed back, right? So, that's why that happened. I didn't learn that until many, many years later. The story where I was stuck after getting laid off, right? I was at a networking event where I met somebody that made the introduction for me, right? So whatever you feel compelled to do, tiny steps, right? Tiny little things that you can do. What little action can you take to move in a certain direction? I'm a big believer. Active people get lucky. All the good things that have happened in my life because I've been out doing something through that wisdom inside of me that I call it the Holy Spirit operating through me, guided me to do.
I love that. And those same principles guide me as well. And I often, in working with my own clients, I will say you don't get up the staircase any other way than one step at a time, maybe two if you're super fit and agile. But, so many of us spend our lives focused on the top of the staircase that we miss the only way we are getting up is one step at a time. So if you're stuck or in a place that maybe life isn't exactly what you wanted for yourself, I always find a next right step approach is kind of the most practical way to look at it and figure out something that you can do with commitment and consistency. Like, don't pick something that you're not going to do or you think you will fail at. For some people, it may be as simple as saying, I'm going to get 15 minutes of sun on my head every day, or I'm going to take 15 minutes to walk outside, or I'm going to drink enough water. Like, the bigger things in life begin with the habits that you have when nobody else is watching. And I think that's really important, for anybody who's listening, for anybody who's struggling, to recognize you can take a moment and make a choice to empower yourself right now with one next step. You don't need to focus on the whole staircase. Just pick one next step. Joe, what are your thoughts and kind of practical next steps that listeners could take if they're stuck in something that no longer serves them?
Go have coffee or lunch with somebody, right? Talk about what's going on. Human beings are we're all good and coming from a good place, right? And share your struggles with others. Everybody's struggling. I don't care how much money somebody has or how much success. Everybody's struggling with someone, right? With something. Everybody gets stuck, right? Plateaus are okay. So go have lunch with somebody. I'm looking at my bookshelves, right? Go buy a book. Or ask for a book recommendations. One thing out of a book can cause a light bulb to go off. Go to an event or a seminar, right? The other thing is I'm a big believer in getting help, right? And hire a coach. Coaches have played critical roles in my life. Therapy has played a critical role in my life. Right? Get help if you need it, right? Whether it's from a therapist or from a coach or from a friend. I've gotten great advice from friends along the way and given advice, to other folks. So go talk to people, right? And there's a lot of wisdom out there. And again, one thing can turn the light bulb on for you. Here are two great questions everybody can ask. Share what you got going on in your life with a trusted a friend or colleague and ask them, what advice do you have for me? And then the second question, if you were me, what would you do? It's asking for advice, but it's in a different way. And a third great question is, who else should I be talking to, right? Follow the breadcrumbs, right? But listen to what you're guided to go do.
And I will add to that you also have to have the recognition that people can only meet you from their own place of understanding and experience.
Right.
So, if you're wanting to ask somebody about what you should do about making a career change from somebody that maybe doesn't work or is in a field that has nothing to do with anything that you aspire to do, like, be intentional around who you're asking those questions of. But I love that. And again, what I'm hearing from you, Joe, that I think is, again, really practical information for our audience, it's basically showing up for yourself.
Amen to that, right? We got to take care of ourselves first, right? For everything else to fall into place. And there's the old saying, right? Wherever you go, there you are. And so oftentimes I see with clients and with people in general, right, is that they're trying to escape a situation. So they change jobs, they change relationships, they change where they live, but they haven't settled themselves down internally. Oftentimes it's some childhood issue, that continues to play out in their life. We got to take care of ourselves. And we've learned that, boy, in the last 3 years with the pandemic, with self-care, right? What are we, and I coach leaders around when you're setting key performance indicators for your people, include a self-care thing in. If people are working from home and they say, all right, I commit to walking the dog in the middle of the day for 30 minutes, you got to ask them every week, have you been walking the dog every day, right? That makes them a better person, right? It makes them more productive at work if we're taking care of ourselves. So everybody remember, wherever you go, there you are. Realize that, not to beat yourself up, but to say, okay, what are the patterns that continue to play out in my life?
Right. Joe, this was an amazing conversation. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, tell us how they can do that.
Yeah, they can go to my website, thesalescatalyst.net. Again, that's thesalescatalyst.net. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter as well.
Love it. And anybody who's listening that hasn't subscribed to Get Unstuck radio show pages, you can find us on Get Unstuck Radio on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Coming up next week, I have another incredible guest, Kate Emerson. Kate is a multi-published author, coach, and retreat facilitator who inspires and guides her clients to get the life they most desire. Joe, as we wrap this up, what is one thing that if you could go back and tell your younger self something, what would you tell them?
Relax.
I love it.
I've been uptight and you worry about stuff and it's like calm down, right? Relax and calm down. It's going to be okay.
That is fantastic advice to send us out. For everyone who tuned in today, I'm so grateful to you being here. Joe, thank you for your time, your wisdom, your experience. I think this was not only helpful for me, but I know helpful for others. And I look forward to joining you all next week for another inspired conversation.